Chapter 46. One More Miracle. Amelia looked like a white dove in a sea of crows. She was dressed in a short white chiffon dress that covered one shoulder. A thin black ribbon was tied around her waist, slimming Amelia's figure, and a thin black veil covered the front of her face. A tribute to the wedding she'd never have. She stood out from the crowd of people dressed in black, and if she had a pair of pure white wings, she would look like the angel Moriarty had so often compared her to. Moriarty, he hadn't earned a proper funeral. He'd been buried with all the other criminals, upon Amelia's insistent begging. Moriarty had at least earned his name inscribed on a stone, rather than a nameless grave Mycroft had originally intended for the consulting criminal. Amelia watched as Sherlock's coffin was lowered into the grave, clutching onto Mycroft's arm even tighter. He winced ever so slightly, but made no comment, allowing Amelia one moment to grieve for her fiancé. Her tears had dried up days ago, but despite that, she still made sure to wear extra strength waterproof mascara. A dry sob caught in Amelia's throat as the gravedigger stepped into Sherlock's grave and started to cover it with the dirt. She didn't blink once until the grave had been completely filled with dirt. Then she wrapped her arms around her shoulders, watching silently as people paid their respects. "I'm so sorry for your loss," said Molly, coming up to her. Amelia nodded once as the other people filled up to her, all repeating Molly's words to a vague, verifying degree. Amelia and Mycroft stayed there until all the others had gone, Mycroft reassuring his parents that he and Amelia would cope. "I just can't believe he's gone," Amelia said hollowly, walking over to Sherlock's headstone and placing a hand on it. "After all we've been through, you know." She looked to Mycroft. "I don't really think you hated him. Not in the end. You were closer than that." Mycroft remained silent. She turned around to face Mycroft, perching on the edge of Sherlock's headstone. "You two always acted like you hated each other, but I could see past it. You loved him. You still do. He means more to you than you let on." "And he didn't to you?" Mycroft asked, arching his eyebrow. "You know that he did," Amelia said quietly. Ella's office, a few hours later. John sat in a chair across from Ella, his therapist, watching as rain rolled down the window beside him, thunder rumbling loudly. "What's today?" Ella questioned. "Do you want to hear me say it?" John said, quizzically frowning. 18 months since our last appointment, Ella informed John, gently flipping through her files. "Do you read the papers?" John said in a quiet anger. "Sometimes." And you watch telly?" You know why I'm here. I'm here because..." His voice cracked painfully, unable to continue. He could see now why Amelia had refused to go see Ella with him. His death, John was trying not to say his name, had affected her more than anyone else. John swallowed, looking down as he fought the urge to break into tears. "What happened, John?" "Sure," John started, once again unable to finish his sentence. "You need to get it out. My best friend, Sherlock Holmes," John said softly, sniffling, "is dead." His resolve broke, and John's tears began to stream down his face, mirroring that of the raindrops on the windows. How horribly cliché, he could imagine Sherlock saying, which only made the tears come even more. "Take a moment," said Ella gently, offering John a box of Kleenex. After John had blown his nose and his tears had dried up, Ella continued on. "There's stuff that you wanted to say, but didn't say it?" "Yeah," John said hoarsely. "Say it now." "No," John said tearfully, shaking his head. Then more forcibly, "Sorry, I can't." 2 days later. "I'll be at the grave at 2:30 today, like I have been every day for the past week, which you would know if you answered my calls. It'd do you good to come visit. Amelia Holmes." Amelia Holmes. John smiled weakly at the thought. She'd gotten her last name legally changed to Holmes after Sherlock's death. Mycroft aiding in the paperwork. Her final tribute to him. A nod in his direction. John stared out the window sadly, wondering how he and his sister had gotten to where they were today. What had they done to earn this? John couldn't end up with an answer to his question. John stepped out of the cab, his eyes falling upon his sister. The first thought that crossed his mind was, she looks terrible. Amelia's hair was knotted and tangled, and she wore no makeup, save for her signature red lipstick. And in that moment, for the first time since they were children, John could see Amelia as she truly was. Bruised, tired, battered, scared, and broken. This was her moment of weakness, and she had let sentiment rule her head, and now it was ruling her body as well as her mind. Amelia was well and truly broken. Her wings had been torn off, and she'd been thrown to the ground, crashing with the harsh reality that now faced her. The harsh reality of a future without Sherlock. Nonetheless, she forced a smile to her lips, pulling her brother into a tight hug as she led Mrs. Hudson and John to Sherlock's grave, all the while making idle chit-chat about things in the news. "There's all that stuff, all that science equipment," said Mrs. Hudson, setting a bouquet of flowers beside Sherlock's headstone. "I left it all in boxes. I don't know what needs doing. I thought I'd take it to a school," she said, looking at John and Amelia. "Would you?" "I can't go back to the flat again. Not at the moment," John said, looking at Amelia. She had fallen silent once the three of them reached Sherlock's grave, her lips tightly pursed. She wrung her hands nervously, nodding and unnodding them. "I'm angry," John continued on, taking a deep breath. Mrs. Hudson patting him on the arm gently. "It's okay," Mrs. Hudson said sympathetically. "There's nothing unusual in that. That's the way he made everyone feel." She looked at the black marble headstone. "All the marks on my table, and the noise, firing guns at 1:30 in the morning." "Yeah," John said softly. "Bloody specimens in my fridge," Miss Hudson said. "Imagine keeping body where there's food." "Yes." "And the fighting," Mrs. Hudson, referring to Sherlock and Amelia's constant bickering, "drove me up the aisle with all the carrying-ons." "Yeah, listen, I'm not exactly that angry, okay?" John said forcefully. Mrs. Hudson's face crumbled. "Okay." She turned away. "I'll leave you two alone you know." She walked away tearfully, pushing out a tissue from her purse to blow her nose. John glanced over at his sister, then down at Sherlock's grave. John took in a deep breath. John mumbled, pulling together his emotions. He leaned over and hugged Amelia tightly, letting her go after a moment. You told me once you weren't a hero," John said slowly. There were times I didn't even think you were human. But let me tell you this. You are the best man, the most human being that I've ever known. And no one will ever convince me that you told me a lie. And so, there." A single tear rolled down Amelia's cheek, falling onto the ground atop Sherlock's grave. He blew out a breath, holding back a whimper. He stepped forward and placed his hand on his headstone. "I was so alone, and I owe you so much." "Okay." He turned away, more tears slightly falling down Amelia's face. John stopped suddenly, then turned back. "No, please, there's just one more thing, mate. One more miracle, Sherlock, for me. Don't be dead. Would you just do that for me? Just stop it. Stop this." He looked at Amelia, sensing that she needed time by herself. "I'll be with Mrs. Hudson, okay?" He wiped his eyes, sniffling loudly. He raised his head, coming to attention in respect for his best friend. He nodded a salute to Sherlock, dismissing himself, then walking away. Amelia nodded once as John walked away, turning back towards Sherlock's grave. "You're such an idiot, She laughed hollowly at her insult. Real cheap coming from the girl who just insulted her dead fiancé. I know. Amelia bit her lip and looked down at the ground. God, I really don't know what to say. I've already said everything that needed to be said. You may have been an idiot, Sherlock, but you were my idiot. I know you were real. I know what you told me wasn't a lie, because I saw the broken bits of you, the broken bits that you didn't show anyone else. I put my faith into them, and I'm not going to stop believing, just because you told me otherwise. You asked me to listen to you and to do what you asked, and I swear to you I will show the world the truth about Sherlock Holmes. Now it's my turn to ask a favor. Stop this. Just stop it. If there's one thing you've always been remarkably good at, it was surprising me. Now surprise me one last time, Sherlock. Just one more miracle. Sherlock, for everyone, for me." She sighed, lowering her head, and stood there, entirely broken. She was reflected in the smooth marble of Sherlock's headstone, Sherlock's name appearing to be carved across her chest. She covered her face with her hands, letting out a soft sob. She smirked through her tears, then turned on her heels and walked away. Just out of her view stood a dark-haired man with crystal blue eyes and a long coat. He watched the angel leave, pursing his lips at the tears that streamed down her face. He stood there for a moment, his coat billowing out behind him in the wind. He frowned sadly, turning on his heels and walking off quietly. And so silence fell upon the Watsons like a heavy cloud of grief. But the angel gritted her teeth and prepared for war because the east wind was coming in, and there was no telling what it would bring with it. Perhaps, just perhaps, it would bring one last miracle. One more miracle. Chapter 47. Epilogue. 1 year later. Sherlock watched Amelia play her violin from outside 221B, Baker Street. She had changed a lot since his death, to the point where he almost didn't recognize her. She's grown her hair out so it fell to just above her waist, and she kept it tied in a braid most of the time. She had lost a considerable amount of weight since Sherlock had faked his death, and her clothes hung loosely on her, a few sizes too big. One of Sherlock's old blazers was strapped around her shoulders, way too large for her, but she didn't seem to care. The top of her tattered copy of Pride and Prejudice poking out of the pocket. She danced around as she played the violin, her eyes closed as she immersed herself in the music. Sherlock could hear the music playing through the windows, identifying it as the song Sherlock had composed for Amelia. It seemed like ages ago when he had written it, the 2 short years feeling more like 2 decades to the detective. Perhaps he should... No, he couldn't tell her. Not yet. It was too short. Moriarty's network wasn't completely dismantled, and Amelia wouldn't be safe until it was. He had to protect her. That's what this was all about. Protecting her. Protecting Amelia. Protecting Amelia from the dangers of the people who wanted to kill her. And she had a lot of people trying to kill her. But it was worth it, and it was always going to be worth it. Sherlock would give up anything for her, even if she didn't know he was alive. Well, that certainly is a complication, Sherlock thought with a small smile. He ran a hand through his dark curls, a significant 1 inch longer than it had been last year. He stepped back into the shadows as he saw Amelia walk up to the window. She furrowed her brow, and for a short moment Sherlock started to panic, thinking she had seen him. Upon a closer examination, she saw that she was on the phone, presumably with her brother, by her exasperated eye rolls and her heavy sighs. She let out a laugh that was silenced by the window, a blush splatting across her cheeks. How much Sherlock had missed that blush! He had memorized the way it spread across her nose and up to her ears, the way the few freckles she had turned red, the way she'd hide her face behind a curtain of hair as if she were embarrassed of her reddening cheeks, the way she would giggle immediately after, realizing she had done it again. Sherlock couldn't fight the smile creeping up his face. Another 1.5 years, that was how long Mycroft estimated it would be until Mycroft's network was down, and Sherlock could reveal himself to Amelia. A 1.5 years seemed like an eternity away to Sherlock, but it'd be worth it in the end, because that was what love was about, putting the other person's needs before your own, despite how much it pained you to do so. Sherlock took out his new phone. The last one had been destroyed in the fall, and stared down at the screen. Sherlock dialed Amelia's number, holding his phone to his ear as it rang. "Hello," Amelia answered, her voice crackling over the speaker. "Who is this?" Sherlock remained silent, despite desperately wanting to say something. Anything, but unable to. He bit down on his lip to keep his words from bursting out. The taste of iron filled his mouth. Sherlock realized he must have cut himself on his teeth. Amelia sighed heavily. "This isn't funny," she said, then hung up. Sherlock listened to the dial tone for a moment longer before he lowered his phone and tucked it back into his pocket. He pursed his lips tightly, kicking the ground with his foot. A pebble skittered into the street and fell into the gutter. He turned on his heel, his coat flapping out behind him as he walked down the streets. His hands in his pocket, his face remained cold, making his sadness in an indifference. Another 1.5 years, and Amelia would get the miracle she had wished for. Okay, Knights, so that was the last of the Brilliant Sherlock fanfiction. In the comments below on any of the videos in this whole playlist, you guys could just tell me if you liked how I did this playlist compared to the others, or if you like how I do the introductions at the beginning and then my sign outs, or just reading the chapter for the whole video without any introductions or closing. So yeah, peace out, Knights.